Wanderlust cables appear to be very large, but they're actually a collection of very small cable crosses. They can wander across the fabric. That's why I call them that. Most styles of cable show up best on a purl background. These are an exception. The center panel of this scarf, where the diamond resides, is entirely knit stitches. The diamond illusion is created by crossing only 2 stitches at a time every other row. The 2 stitches just trade pegs. The one that is replaced first is the one that will show on the knit face of the fabric. In this movie, I will go over the pattern for the entire scarf pretty lightly because I figure the only people who will be working it are intermediate and beyond, so I don't have to tell you how to knit and purl. The scarf requires 32 stitches, a single rake, and at least 10 rows to begin and end of knit 2, purl 1 ribbing. You may use the traditional way of making your purl stitches, or what I'm doing, the no-purl method for single rakes, which is demonstrated in the movie shown on the screen. Extending upward from the bottom ribbing on stitches 3, 6, and 9 from each edge will work tuck rib trim, or you may substitute a non-rolling edge of your preference. 2 ways of making tuck rib trim are shown in these 2 movies, and there are links for you to use in the program notes. So in this movie, we're going to focus on making that center diamond panel. All right to left rows, starting with numbers 1, 3, 5, and so on. So all odd numbered rows. Knit your choice of non-roll edging, however it should be, and knit all other stitches. For the trim I used, I like to slip the very first stitch and knit the others. On the even numbered rows, that's when we work the cable. So for row 2, we knit up to the center 2 stitches. I suggest that you mark the center 2 pegs to help you keep track of the cable. And we're going to lift the 2 center stitches off of those pegs after enlarging them a little and cross them. I'm crossing right over left, meaning the right one goes on the left peg first. It's okay to let the stitches grow a little bit to make the cabling easier. Just tighten them back up after you're finished. Knit to the end of the row. Knit right to left as usual. And row 4 is very easy. We just repeat row 2. So twice in a row, we have crossed those center 2 stitches. If you went right over left as I did, do that again. If left over right, just be consistent. After this, we'll begin moving each of those 2 stitches outward and moving the yarn markers with them so that we stay abreast of what we're doing and don't get confused. Knit the rest of this row. Row 5 is all knitting. Row 6, as we approach the center of the work, knit the 4 center stitches a little bit loosely. Then the one that was previously to the left of the marker, we'll move the left marker to that peg and cross its stitch with the stitch that was on the previously marked peg. The whole time we're moving the legs of the diamond apart, the stitch that began towards the center will be the one that is placed on its new peg first to make the outline. Working the next 2 stitches, we also enlarge them a little bit to make the cross easy. Lift them both off, move the marker 1 peg to the right, move the stitch that was at the center outward to that peg first. The one that was to the right goes towards the center and gets its new position on that peg, and knit the rest of the row normally. This establishes a pattern that we will use throughout. As the diamond legs move apart, the stitch that began closest to the center will be the first one to be replaced on the new peg when we lift the stitches. We'll change that as the diamond legs begin to move together. Row 7 is normal knitting right to left. Row 8 is a repeat of row 6, except that the positions, of course, keep changing. We keep moving the stitch marker over, placing the stitch that was closest to the center on the peg that now holds the stitch marker, and the stitch that was originally on that marker moves to the center. The same operation takes place in mirror image after we knit over to the next two pegs, the marked one and the one just to the right or outside of the diamond from the marked peg. Lift the two stitches, move the marker to the right, move the previous centermost stitch to the right, move the stitch that was on the outside of the diamond to the inside of the diamond, tighten up, and knit normally around the rest of row 8. Row 9, knit right to left normally. Row 10 is worked just as the last two were worked. When we reach the peg that is marked and the one to the left of it for the first transfer, knit them a little loosely or loosen them enough so as to be able to remove them from the pegs, move the stitch marker to the left or outwards from the center, replace the formerly towards the center stitch first on its new peg, then the other one, knit that. Now there are several knit stitches between the legs of the diamond, knit over to the next leg, and again repeat the operation in mirror image, loosening the stitches, moving the stitch marker to the peg to the right with the stitches lifted off of the pegs. Move the stitch that was towards the center outward to its new peg first, the other stitch inward. It's now part of the background. And knit to the end of the row. Row 11 is knitting right to left. Row 12, we knit up to our marked stitch and repeat the same operation. Lifting the two stitches, moving the marker away from the center to a new peg, moving the stitch that came from nearest the center to that newly marked peg, second one to the empty peg, knit across the several pegs that are now between the legs of the diamond, and we'll repeat it in a mirror image. As you can see, you actually could make any size diamond. I could have moved the legs of the diamond apart only, say, 4 stitches. It does need to be an even number. Or we could continue this process until the diamond was enormous. For this pattern, we're going to work until there are 10 knit stitches between the knit stitches that are outlining the diamond. As usual, the stitches that we just lifted swap positions after placing the marker on its new peg, and we knit on to the right edge of the fabric. Row 13, right to left as usual. Now row 14. This is our last outward movement. The legs of the diamond are still moving apart, so we'll repeat what we did last row. Knit up to the marker, enlarge the stitch that is marked along with the one a little bit to the left of it. Place the marker to the left of its previous position, cross the 2 stitches, knit over to the next marker, and repeat the same operation in mirror image. Stitch nearest the center moves out, the other stitch moves inward. The marker is settled beneath the outward stitch in its new position. Row 15, knit right to left. Row 16, knit up to the marked stitch, and now it's time to start moving inwards with the legs of the diamond. So we're going to knit the stitch that is marked and the one to the right of it loose enough to lift them, move the marker inward this time towards the center, move the stitch that was on the outside towards the center first, which is a reversal of what we've been doing. The operation is the same, it's just reversed. Now the stitches that are on the edge of the diamond are moving towards the center. We knit over to the next marked position. That is the stitch that outlines the diamond. We will lift it and the stitch that's towards the center of the diamond, move the outer one towards the inner position, and move the marker with it. As usual, knit all the way to the right-hand end of the row. For row 17, knit back normally, knitting every stitch all the way to the left. Row 18, knit from left to right up to the marker. The 2 stitches involved will be the marked stitch and the one towards the center from the marked stitch. Lift them, move the marker towards the center, Move the outer stitch towards the center. Move the inner stitch to the outer position. It's now background. Tighten up, knit over to the next marked position. Lift the stitch before the marker and the stitch on the marker. Move the marker inward towards the center of the diamond. Trade places with the stitches, making sure to replace the outer stitch towards the inside first. Row 19, knit right to left. Row 20, knit up to the marked positions. Knit the marked stitch and the stitch to the right of it, loosely enough to cross them. Move the marked stitch that was on the outside towards the center. Seat the second stitch on the outer peg. Knit over to the next marked position and repeat the operation in reverse. So for the first half of our diamond, the legs that outline the diamond were moving away from each other. Now they've been steadily moving towards each other for a while. Keep your chosen trim in mind while finishing the row to the right. For row 21, knit right to left. Row 22, knit up to the marked position. Knit the marked stitch and the one to the right of it. Lift them both. Move the marker in. Move the outer stitch towards the center. The inner stitch towards the outer edge. Knit on over to the next marker and repeat the operation in reverse, moving the right stitch, which is the marked stitch, one place to the center along with the marker, and the left stitch, which is the one towards the center of the diamond, to the outside. Complete the row by knitting all the way to the right. Then begin row 24 by knitting from left to right up to the first marked stitch. By now, there are only 2 plain knitted pegs between the 2 marked pegs. The marked pegs hold the stitches that have been traveling or wandering. So this time, when we knit all of those stitches and move the outer stitches inward, the traveling stitches are side by side again. After knitting over to the right to complete the row, you have finished one repeat of the diamond cable and you're ready to begin knitting to the left, starting with row 1 all over again. Here are a few notes before I leave you to your knitting. Don't be dismayed that your knitting up by the loom will look like the picture on the left, rather distorted while you're working it. The good news is that peeking underneath will tell you where you are in the pattern if somehow you lose a marker. Along with working the diamond, you will have also been making some sort of non-roll ribbing along the edge. You might have used garter stitch, or you might have done nothing with the idea of crocheting along the edge later, or you might have done nothing, as I did while demonstrating the diamond, but in actual fact, I stopped every few rows to make this Afterthought Tuck ribbing. Since it is worked on stitches 3, 6, and 9 from each edge of the work, it extends directly up from the purl stitches in the knit 2 purl 2 hem. You may also have worked this purling the purl stitches on alternate rows, which is the other way to get tucked rib trim, and it will come out looking identical. I used number 4 yarn, one of my favorites, Premier Everyday Worsted, working until there were 10 stitches between the outer edges of the diamond, getting about 4 stitches per inch on a 1/2 inch gauge loom. And it may help you to know that at that gauge, one whole 24 row repeat makes about 4 inches of length in the project. The links to the movies that describe 2 different ways to work the tuck rib trim are in the program notes for you. Remember to repeat the hem at the final end of the work. Then bind off and weave in your tails. I have a very similar scarf for those who prefer to work on double knitting boards. There is a link for you in the program notes.